all living organisms share certain characteristics. Whether you're a plant, like a tree living in a temperate forest, or an animal, such as a gazelle or a zebra living on the savanna, or a microorganism that lives in an extreme environment like the hot springs in Yellowstone where the temperature is around 85 degrees centigrade, almost the boiling point of water, there are certain characteristics all of these different organisms share that we use to define life. If you possess all of these characteristics, you're alive. If you're missing just one of these characteristics, you're not. The first characteristic of life as we know it is it's organized. Hopefully you already looked at the video on the levels of biological organization and you realize that, if I break down myself or a gazelle or a tree, any living organism, to its fundamental components, it's made of atoms. These atoms fit together to make molecules, and little molecules can sometimes be grown into great big macromolecules, which then form organelles and cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and ultimately an organism. But if I'm alive, whether it's a multicellular gazelle or a unicellular bacteria, I'm arranged in these levels of organization. One of the things about maintaining this degree of organization is it requires energy. If you think about your bedroom, if you don't put energy into keeping it picked up on a regular basis, as you use it, t-shirts, towels, dirty socks, and underwear just kind of would get left all over the place. You have to put energy into picking things up in order to maintain its organization. And if life's going to maintain its organization, we have to put energy into the system. For the most part, with one exception, all of the energy that maintains organization on Earth comes from photosynthesis. That is, plants using sun energy to combine carbon dioxide and water chemically to make larger molecules and macromolecules, a process we can talk about later on. But through this process of photosynthesis, energy is used to maintain organization. For animals, we can't do photosynthesis. We have to get our energy from some other source. Hey, since the plant's doing the photosynthesis, we can simply eat the plant, break down the molecules that the plant used the sun energy to build, and get energy from there. We call this process metabolism, and the goal of metabolism is take a food source. It can be a plant directly that did photosynthesis, or another animal that ate the plant. Think about having a steak. You're eating a cow that ate some grass. Take that food source, chemically break it down, and extract the energy from breaking it down to make this molecule ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That is your body's energy currency. Whenever you use energy, it comes in the flavor of ATP. The process of you using a food source to make ATP is called metabolism. The process of a plant using sun energy to make biological molecules that you can later eat is called photosynthesis. And in order to maintain organization, life requires energy input. We also maintain a specific internal environment. That is, you should realize that my body is, I'm usually about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. My blood glucose is usually about, or it should be about 100 milligrams per deciliter. My pH is usually about 7.2, and so on and so forth. Your body maintains a constant internal environment. And if that internal environment starts to change, your body has mechanisms to bring it back to where it's supposed to be. When it's a hot day, your temperature starts to rise, your body says, whoa, I don't want to get this warm. I need to do something to cool back down to where I was. I'm going to sweat. I'm going to send more blood to my periphery. In the process, the body cools down and gets back to where we're supposed to be. We call this process homeostasis. maintaining a consistent internal environment. Now, a consequence of this need to maintain a constant internal environment is there has to be an inside. Stop and think about it. In order for you to keep everything pretty much the same in your body, or for a plant to keep everything in a particular order inside its cells, there has to be a difference between the inside and the outside. So we should be aware that, kind of as a consequence of this life maintaining a constant internal environment, life also maintains boundaries. And if you think about where life begins, the level of organization at the cellular level, as we talk about cells a little bit more, we'll see that the cellular level is the first place where we've got a structure that can determine the difference between inside and outside. Life responds to its environment. Sometimes a response can be as rapid as shining a bright light and kind of wincing, turning away, or touching a hot stove and jerking your hand away. Sometimes responding to your environment can be as subtle as, in the fall, the trees stop making chlorophyll, the leaves essentially die and fall off. Both of these cases are life responding to the environment and altering what it was doing to maintain itself. Life also reproduces. If something's alive, it has the capacity to reproduce. Well, this is one of those ones where it is absolutely necessary for any species to reproduce to maintain the species. But as far as individuals go, individuals don't need to reproduce to be alive. That is, I'm a human being, I'm alive, and I don't have to have any children in order for me to be alive. But if all human beings stopped having children, well, then there wouldn't be human beings for that much longer. The goal of reproduction, or what reproduction really is taking our genetic material, DNA. I'm sure you've heard of it, and if you haven't, we'll learn about it a little bit more later on. But I take my genetic material, my genes, and I basically randomly say, you know what, I'm going to take half of my genes, and I'm going to give or share half of my genes with half of your genes, whoever it is I'm going to be reproducing with. And we mix these genes up, and we get a new organism. A new organism that's similar to both of us, but just a little bit different. And these little differences allow life to do one more really important thing that makes life really different from, well, I guess, not life. And that is it adapts. And adaptation is one of those things that is really difficult for an individual to see on a day-by-day or week-by-week or even a year-by-year basis. Because adaptation takes place over tens to hundreds of generations. Stop and think about it this way. If I have a child and that child has a trait that makes them really good at surviving, well, they're more likely to live and have more children. And if they pass on that trait that makes them really good at surviving, well, those children, and so on and so forth. However, if I have a child that just happens to have a trait that makes them more susceptible to a disease or more likely to, I don't know, get eaten by a dinosaur before they have a chance to procreate, before they have a chance to reproduce, well, then that trait shouldn't stick around nearly as long, and it'll basically get wiped out. Life adapts. We change over time. It's a slow process. It can be difficult to see. But if you go to the website, you see there, radiolab.org and so on and so forth, there's a really neat podcast on adaptations of Arctic foxes and how if you change the environment, you can get it to happen a lot faster than you might think. So in review, life is organized. It requires energy to maintain that level of organization. It responds, it maintains a constant internal environment and boundaries, responds to this environment or to the environment, reproduces, and finally adapts.